All right, let's jump right in. We are diving deep into the cryptic world of one of history's most famous, or maybe infamous, prophets, Nostradamus. Now, we're not going to try and solve all his mysteries at once. No way. Instead, we're going to focus our lens on just one, single, fascinating four-line prophecy, one about a siege that happens in the dead of night. And that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? What does a 500-year-old riddle like this actually mean for us today? How do we even begin to unpack it? Well, that's what we're here to do. Let's solve this puzzle together. So here it is, Century 1, Quatrain 41, in its original Old French. And at first glance, it's pretty much impossible to read, isn't it? The language is archaic, the phrasing is just bizarre. And you know what? That was probably by design. You gotta remember, Nostradamus was writing this in the 16th century, a super dangerous time to be making bold predictions. This kind of vague, poetic language, it was like a shield, a layer of protection from some very serious accusations. But what happens when we peel back that layer?
Ah, okay, now we're getting somewhere. With a modern translation, the mystery starts to crack open. All of a sudden, we have characters, we have a setting, we even have a plot. There's a night attack, a seaside battle, these really cryptic figures, and even a hint of espionage. So let's break this thing down piece by piece.
First things first, let's tackle the most straightforward part of this whole prophecy, the actual physical fight itself. Nostradamus really starts this off with a vivid, almost cinematic scene. I mean, compared to the lines that come later, this part is pretty direct. He's painting a really clear picture of a desperate situation. You can almost feel the darkness, the coastal setting, the high casualty rate. It's all right there in those first two lines. So the key takeaway here is that we can pull out actual tactical details. The attack is a surprise, right? It's happening under the cover of darkness. The location is strategic, it's near the sea. And the stakes, they are incredibly high. That phrase, few escape, tells you everything you need to know. This is a brutal, no-holds-barred kind of battle. Okay, so let's shift gears. We're moving from the chaos of the battlefield to, well, the quiet whispers in the back rooms. The prophecy takes this sharp turn from a literal fight to something way more symbolic and a lot more intriguing. And this is where it gets really interesting. Who are these people? A woman of joy? A weakened sun? I mean, these don't sound like soldiers or generals. This is the language of court intrigue, of personal drama. It pulls us in a totally different direction. Now, that phrase, woman of joy, is rarely ever taken literally in these kinds of prophetic texts. So instead of a specific person, it probably represents a concept, an idea. It could be a symbol for a sudden, maybe even treacherous turn of fortune for the city under siege. It introduces this idea of trouble brewing from the inside. So when you put that together with the return of a weakened sun, the story gets so much deeper. This isn't just an attack from the outside anymore, is it? It suggests a collapse from within, a failure of leadership, a sudden loss of strength, maybe even an act of betrayal that completely cripples the city's ability to defend itself. And all of this brings us to the final line, the one that really pulls back the curtain and shows us the real game being played behind the scenes. This right here is the key that unlocks the whole thing. The huge battle we saw in the first two lines, it might not even be the main event. It seems like the real conflict, the thing that decides everything, is happening in the shadows. What we're seeing here are the classic tools of espionage. You've got secret communications, these hidden letters, and the ultimate covert weapon, poison. This totally reframes everything. It suggests the city's fate isn't being sealed by swords and arrows, but by secrets and deception. So, we've looked at the battle, we've looked at the symbolic figures, and we've uncovered the secret plot. Let's take a step back and see how all these pieces fit together to tell one complete story. When you put it all in order, a really clear narrative starts to take shape. It all kicks off with that surprise military attack. The fighting is brutal, for sure, but the decisive action, it's not happening on the battlefield. It's an internal betrayal, a loss of strength from the inside, all orchestrated through a secret plot with poison and hidden messages. It's a complete drama, and it feels so timeless because it echoes real history, right? How many sieges in history were decided not by a battering ram, but by a whispered secret? And honestly, that's the genius of these things. They are so incredibly dense. In just a handful of words, Nostradamus gives us a setting, a conflict, rising action, and a climax.
It's this wild combination of vivid imagery and super cryptic symbolism that has kept people totally hooked for centuries. So, what are you supposed to take away from all this? Well, maybe the real power of this little prophecy isn't just about what it might predict, but in the classic archetypal story it tells. And it leaves us with one final big question to think about. Is the reason we're still talking about Nostradamus because he was a genuine prophet, or because he was a master storyteller who just really, really understood the timeless patterns of human conflict? I'll let you decide. Thanks for joining me.